Hello everyone, happy Tuesday and welcome to story time. This is going to be my last virtual story time for a while. I am going to start in-person story times in April. So if you guys are interested, you can stop by Tuesdays and Thursdays at 11 for in-person story times, which is exciting. So this week is, it's like a National Folktale and Fairy Tale Week. So we have displays up in the library, and Kara is going to read the story in Spanish tomorrow on Wednesday night on our Facebook and our YouTube. So if you would like to see that in Spanish, you can visit her on Wednesday. I am going to read it in English. We only have the Spanish version here at the library, so she was nice enough to translate it into English for me so I could read it to you guys. It is called Domitila, and it is a Cinderella story based in the Mexican tradition. It's going to be a little bit different. I am going to take some pictures and I will show you the pictures while I read this translated version, because I can't hold both of these things and show you pictures and read. So let's get started. Once upon a time, there lived a peasant and his wife in a house that was made of mud, burnt and dried by the sun in Hidalgo, a state in Mexico. They had only one daughter who was sweeter than a cactus flower in the spring, people said. Her name was Domitila. The family worked hard to build their little adobe house. Domitila learned from her parents how to choose the right type of dirt and mix with the right quantity of sand and clay to make the bricks. First, water was poured from the well. Later, straw was mixed in that was brought from the stables where the sheep were housed to make the bricks more resistant. Meanwhile, as the bricks were laid out to dry in the sun, Domitila's mother would tell old stories from the family. She always finished with a reminder. Remember, my daughter, what my mother would always say and what her mother would say to her. Do everything with care and always add in a small dash of love. The bricks were piled in rows, one on top of the other, in order to build the walls of the house. Carefully, openings were left for the windows so the majestic mountains of the Sierra Madre could be seen in the distance. If you only have a little bit of new wool left, you could have a pretty new shawl, Mama. The fringe would be purple like the mountains and the border like the sun with pink and yellow wool, sighed Domitila. One day, while Domitila and her parents were making beautiful sandals called huaraches, the leather bags in their leather store, the sky darkened. It began to rain heavily in the mountains. The water started to flow down from the mountains rapidly through the canyons and quickly overflowed the plains, carrying it with the corn crop. The little adobe house began to fall apart. Soon, all that was left at the foot of the house was two damp walls. Domitila's mother began to tremble and cough. Mama, asked Domitila in a soft voice, how can I help you? Her mother was very ill and could not reply. There is no hope, sighed her father, looking at the house. The bricks melt before they can dry and the sky is filling up with rain clouds again. Domitila, if you really want to help, you should go to the governor's mansion. I heard that they pay very well for help in the kitchen to help with those banquets. With what you may earn there, we can buy food until it's time to plant corn again. Don't worry for your mother or for the house. I will take care of them. Domitila was determined to help her family, so she covered herself with an old shawl and said goodbye to her parents with a kiss. She headed out toward the mansion of the governor of Hidalgo in the storm. When she arrived at the magnificent house, the head chef put her to work right away. Day after day, she worked in the kitchen of this noble family, and every day she dreamed of returning home to help her family that was so poor. One day, the head chef called over Domitila and said, Girl, you have sewn yourself to be a good cook. Now you must cook a nice meal for the grandmother and her grandson. Tonight they are dining alone. Domitila went to work right away. She prepared some of her best family dishes, and the maid took them out on the tray to be served in the great dining room. What is this? Asked Timoteo, the handsome older son of the governor. Never in my life have I seen something such as this, he said, frowning. Call the chef. Domitila came out from the kitchen. She stopped in the threshold of the dining room, scared and shy. Speak for once, demanded the young man abruptly. What is this that you put on the tray? They are nopales, sir, she said, bowing her head respectfully. It's a very special dish that my family makes. Nopales? Are these nopales, as you call them, a very special meal? These are nothing more than weeds from the desert filled with dust and thorns, he exclaimed. The rude words from Timoteo awoke the old grandmother who had fallen asleep waiting to be served dinner. My dear grandson, be a little more polite, she reproached him. We are a noble family. We do not belittle food from the townsfolk. Be respectful to the girl and try some, even though it may only be a little bit different from what has been prepared. Forgive me, grandmother, Timoteo responded. He put on a contrite face and picked up a small morsel of the nopales with a fork. Trying to hide his disgust, he looked at it from side to side, frowning, and finally pushed the cactus dish in his mouth. But before he really tried it, his anger disappeared. Well, this is delicious. He took another bite and exclaimed, This weed has been transformed into a delicacy. What's your secret? It's not a secret, sir. I make them just as my mother showed me. She went away with her head bowed and went back to her work. Timoteo noticed her absence. He devoured the delicious nopales from the tray. As he rubbed his stomach, he marveled at the dish. I have never felt so good. I have to find out how that dish is made. That same night, while Domitila slept, a servant woke her up with the following message. Your mother is very sick. You must return home immediately. Domitila packed up a few things into her shawl, and she told her problem to another cook and left right away before sunup. When she was almost to the house, Domitila's heart almost stopped when she saw her father, very sad, leaning against the door. Papa, how is Mama? She asked nervously. Domitila, her father answered sadly. Mama has died. Oh, Papa, if I had only known, I would have come earlier, cried Domitila, running to where she had last seen her mother before she left. She knelt on the floor at the side of the empty bed, clutching her head. Suddenly, Domitila felt a warm presence come into the room, and in her pain, she looked up and blinked several times in disbelief. There before her, the spirit of her mother. Domitila listened, transfixed with what the spirit said. I will always be with you, my dear child, and remember what my mother always used to say and what her mother used to tell her. Do everything with care and always add a little love to it. Her tender smile of her mother lingered with her for a while after her spirit has gone away. Domitila knew she would never forget her mother's words to her. The next morning, Timoteo came into the dining room of the governor's mansion. He waited for a breakfast as marvelous as the dinner of nopales that he had the night before. He anxiously picked up a forkful from the dish that had been served him. He choked on it. What trick is this? He moaned. Call the chef, he shouted at the maid. The third cook appeared in the doorway. Timoteo tried to clear his throat with sips of tea before he could speak. Are you the one whom I spoke with yesterday? He looked at her carefully without knowing with surety exactly which of the cooks of the family had stopped in the doorway the night before. No, sir, it was the second cook with whom you spoke yesterday. She was called away last night because her mother was gravely ill. And to distract Timoteo's attention from the dreadful meal, the third cook said fearfully, the second cook left so hurriedly that she didn't realize she had left this. And from her pocket, she produced a strip of leather that had come off of Domitila's huarache. Timoteo looked at it closely. The leather was finely tooled and the design was very complex. Could this be the work of the girl too, he murmured. She told us that her mother and the mother of her mother showed her how to do a lot of things, the third cook said hesitantly. Also, she said something about adding something very special to whatever you do, but I can't remember what it was, sir. Timoteo was bewildered. His thoughts hung heavy like the clouds over the Sierra Madre. Do you know where this girl lives? He asked the third cook. Timoteo had to find out. I don't know, sir. All that was said was something about a ranch in some place in Igalo, very far from here. Except for the mountains, almost all of Igalo is a ranch land, said the arrogant young man, shrugging his shoulders. That is all I know, sir, said the third cook, all while walking backwards reverently, and then turned and ran back to the kitchen. Timoteo ran his finger over the smooth piece of tooled leather. He rubbed his empty stomach. If I could just find this girl, I'm sure I would find out her secret, he thought. Saddle my horse, he ordered one of the stable hands. When Timoteo's grandmother found out about his hasty decision, she took off her silk shawl from her shoulders. This shawl has been in our family for generations, she said to Timoteo as she handed it to him. If you have to go, I want to know that my love goes with you. Timoteo placed his grandmother's shawl under his serape, his overcoat. He turned his horse toward the prairies of Igalo. Along the way, the willful boy asked everyone if they had seen a girl that could change the weeds of the desert into delicacies fit for a king and pieces of leather into works of art. Everyone had heard of the young girl, and they told even more stories about her talents, but no one knew where she lived. Timoteo changed course and rode his horse through the desert westward, but Domitila had gone home to her house, which was in the east. Over time, Timoteo's search for the young girl traveled by word of mouth all over the vast state of Igalo. Timoteo's travels led him to the widow Malvina, who stood out in front of her house. Buenos dias, senora, Timoteo called out. Do you know where the talented young girl who can make delicacies from the weeds of the desert? Ah, said Malvina, so this is the rich young man who runs about looking for Domitila. Who doesn't know Domitila in these parts? I know that her mother died, may she rest in peace. If this plan works out well, I may be able to interest the young man in my daughter instead of Domitila, she thought. Now that you ask me, I know where the girl lives, said Malvina to Timoteo, and the woman guided Timoteo in the other direction away from Domitila's house. Aha, she said, this will keep him going in circles for enough time so I can put my plan into action. Then I will show this boy who the real cook is. Gracias, senora, Timoteo said. But when Timoteo rode away following the route that the widow had indicated, Malvina ran in search of her daughter, Pereza, who was to be found lying underneath the shade of a dry bush. Wake up, lazy girl, we are going to be rich, shouted Malvina. The astute old widow caught Pereza by the ear and walked her to the nearest village. Do exactly as I tell you, Malvina ordered. Very soon, the evil Malvina dragged Pereza from house to house all throughout the village. All the while, Pereza begged and cried for food at the entrance of each house. Malvina went around back and robbed the good townspeople of things from their kitchens. Upon return to her hut, Malvina prepared a large fire and ordered Pereza to cook. They spent all night cooking and very early in the wee hours of the morning the next day. Finally, exclaimed the smug Malvina, we are ready. And they set out on their way, balancing baskets of food on their heads and carrying baskets under each arm. They stacked tortillas, enchiladas, tamales, and stuffed peppers that they had made from the food that they had stolen and hid it under their ragged serapes. They walked all throughout the countryside in the direction of the ranch of Domitila's father. When Malvina and Pereza arrived at the house of the widower, they realized that nobody was home. They rummaged around in the cupboards to see if there was any food in the house. There isn't even a morsel of food in this place, announced Malvina. Then they began to fill the cupboards with the food that they had brought. When Domitila and her father returned home from visiting the grave of her mother, they were surprised. There was all kinds of food piled up on the table and even onto the chairs. The astute Malvina and her daughter looked upon the two, pretending to feel sorry for them. Domitila and her father, with grief in their hearts, ate respectfully but without any pleasure. The miserable food had been made from the stolen goods of the townspeople. After a little while, Malvina's ruse began to give some results much better than expected. As Domitila's father missed having someone to take care of them, he married Malvina. So with great regret, Domitila had to begin to serve her stepmother and stepsister. "Aha," said Malvina, "now that I have gotten the widower and his land, it will be much easier to deceive that rich young man when he finally finds the road to this house. I will send Domitila to feed the pigs, and I will get rid of her. Afterwards, I'll serve the food that Domitila made, and I will make him believe that Pereza cooked it." By the time that autumn arrived, the life of Domitila had gotten much worse. "Make more bricks," ordered her stepmother. "I want a bigger house. Go look for more wool. Pereza needs a new shawl." From that time on, Domitila knew what it was like to work without happiness and the supportive words of her mother. Meanwhile, Domitila served her cruel stepmother and her lazy stepsister. Timoteo tried to follow the twisted instructions of Malvina. The young man traveled in the autumn rains, trembling under his wet serape. The wonderful stories about the talented girl that were recounted to him along the way had him even more fascinated with Domitila. The young man, proud as ever, continued on dying of cold and hunger. "Perhaps there is much more to know about this girl besides her cooking," he said. But none of the travelers could tell him exactly where in the whole desert of Igalo this girl lived. Timoteo continued to run his fingers lovingly over the designs carved into the strip of leather. "I will not stop until I find her," he decided. Timoteo dug his heels into his horse to spur him on. One day, Timoteo heard the music in the distance. After traveling so much, he had arrived at the fall festival of Igalo. As he approached, he was surprised to smell a well-known aroma that floated in the air. "Could I be getting nearer to what I've been searching for?" he asked himself. Timoteo spurred his horse into a gallop. This change of direction was not part of Malvina's plan. "Where can I find the person who cooks those delicious nopales that can be smelled a mile away?" asked the young man to all the women at the festival. The women noted that the handsome Timoteo carried the strip of leather with the famous designs of Domitila. "You must be looking for Domitila," the women responded in unison. They told him that Domitila cooked nopales for all the fall festivals and that the dessert wind carried the smell for miles and miles all around. "We sold them all already," they told him. "They are so delicious that people come from all around to buy them." "Of course the people around here know why those nopales turn out so good," said an old woman shouted over the others. "Everyone knows that the care that is put into her work and the love that goes into each task makes them so special." "If you are looking for Domitila, my son, she is not here," said another woman from her stall in the market. "She went to visit her mother's grave. Her footprints are easy to follow. Simply follow the path along the stream and you will find her." The young man thanked everyone courteously for all their help, and he set out on his course again. While he was following the simple directions of the woman, Timoteo reflected on all that had been said about Domitila. Now he realized that Malvina had given him wrong directions. Timoteo went confidently along the opposite direction. From afar, just as the old woman had told him, Timoteo saw a young girl walking. "Buenos dias, señorita," he said as he spurred his horse to hurry. When Timoteo reached her, he got down from his horse and asked, "I'm looking for a girl who is called Domitila. Could you tell me where I could find her?" Timoteo lowered his gaze and saw the huaraches that the girl was wearing. They had the same design as the strip of leather that he had in his hand. As he raised his head to look at her, a soft breeze swept through her hair, allowing, for the first time, Timoteo to see her beautiful features. He looked into her eyes for the first time, just in time for the sunlight to shine over the Sierra mountain peaks, announcing a new day, and then Timoteo knew that in his search he had finally ended. "You are Domitila," he exclaimed. "Sir, you have come so far. You must be very hungry," Domitila said, reflecting upon how skinny the handsome young son of the governor had been in his long travels across the hard climate of the desert. She untied her shawl and took out a tortilla filled with her delicious nopales. Domitila and Timoteo sat in the shade on the banks of the stream. Timoteo recounted how he had been looking all over for Igalo for her and how he had found the widow Malvina, who sent him in the opposite direction. Domitila realized that Malvina had devised an evil plan and that they, the governor's son, her own father, and even she herself, had fallen into the trap. Together they shared a tortilla. Its fragrance arose and enveloped them. Soon as they ate, Timoteo realized the secrets of the nopales. So this is what the people have been saying when they tell of the stories about Domitila, he thought tenderly. I'm sure that this is what the women at the festival tried to tell me and what the cook at my house tried to explain to me. The herbs of the dessert can be converted into delicacies when Domitila cooks them, but it is love which fills my heart. Timoteo was awestruck by the girl. Then he took the beautiful shawl embroidered by his grandmother and wrapped this bright silk around Domitila's shoulders with much tenderness. Domitila and Timoteo went to visit the grave of her mother, and they continued to do so every year since then. And while the coveted shades of the Sierra Madre Mountains cooled in the heat of the desert, they walked along until they came to the capital of Igalo. They went directly to the governor's mansion, but this time Domitila did not go back to being a servant. Instead, she became the precious wife of Timoteo. In time, Timoteo became the governor of Igalo. The good things that his wife had taught him brought goodwill and fortune to the inhabitants of the land. The evil Malvina and the lazy Pereza fled Igalo. Domitila's father moved to the governor's mansion to be with his daughter and her new family. As Domitila's fate, the silk shawl of Timoteo's grandmother shone brilliantly around her shoulders while the family sat down to her delicious nopales around the fireplace in the grand dining room of the governor's mansion. The grandmother slept very happily near them. Timoteo smiles, bouncing his little ones on his knees while Domitila tells them time and time again what her mother used to tell her. Children, do your work with great care and never, but never forget to add a pinch of love. The end.